The Northman is the dark, violent Lion King remake that we've all been waiting for. Let's talk about it now. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch Your Pass, and I've got my fake fur rug on because I'm ready to talk about The Northman, which is coming to theaters on April 22nd, 2022 from Focus Features. It's a stylish historical drama that, has elements of fantasy, elements of history, and a lot of violence and a lot of style. My hot take is I think you should watch it. Overall, it's a stylish, brutal film with great music and a wonderful setting that overcomes its overly long runtime and kind of disappointing character choices. But it is a fantasy epic. It is a historical fantasy epic, and it is just a treat to behold. So I'll tell you a little more about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and then go into the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers. I'm gonna try to keep the spoilers to the ending portion. I think I can do that. So if you don't want to know anything about the film, turn it off at the ending side, but you can keep watching up until then. So in The Northman, you have, and I'm gonna butcher all these names, so I apologize for that. You have Amleth, who is the son of Aurvandil, who's the king of this village up in like Iceland, I guess. It's a small village, but he's a well-loved king. He's a conqueror. It starts with him returning from, like a campaign with loot and servants and things like that. But unfortunately for Amleth, that celebration is short-lived because early on, the king is murdered by his brother. And so Amleth barely survives. He flees and he grows up seeking revenge. And as you can imagine, he has a lot of rage about this. And eventually he tries to enact that revenge. And that's kind of the main story of the Northman. It's kind of similar to the Lion King. You have this like young cub, soon to be king, who is being taught by his father. And then his father's betrayed by a black-haired brother, right? And who's a little bit meeker, not as kind of commanding, and he kind of takes over. So there we go. That's basically Northman. It is a non-animated Lion King. Done. So the things I liked about this movie, the first, and there are a number of them, but the thing I love the most is the music. It has this beautiful, like pumping folk Viking music that underlies a lot of it. And it really does a good job of driving the mood and the action. It really kind of sets the tone, it sets the time, and during the exciting scenes, it really ramps it up. And during some of the kind of more impactful ritual scenes, which I talk about later, like it is, the drums are booming, there's like chanting. It is a really great treat for your ears, and that really contributes to the overall feel of this movie. Second thing I loved are the rituals, and they are very strange. I don't know if they are kind of based on real Norse rituals, but they feel like they could be. There are some very elaborate ritualistic things that happen, dances around the campfire, rituals for to learn the fates of things, rituals for funerals. There is a lot of mythology and lore in this film, and it is really, really interestingly represented. And some of the stuff just is way out there, but all the actors commit perfectly. The film feels, I don't know, true to life. I don't know if it actually is, but it definitely feels like it is a true to life representation of things that could have happened back then. But I guess the things that are not as true to life, but fitting with the time, there are fantasy aspects, that's the third thing I liked. I like the fantasy aspects because in the ritual, sometimes you will have fantasy type elements that come out. You'll have like a seer who can see the future, or someone who should not know who a person is be able to identify them. Or during a ritual, you will have like a vision, or like a big fight. Interesting when this happens because you're not sure if you're seeing things that are real in this world or things that are imagined. And the film kind of plays with this. It'll have big kind of fantasy type elements that occur, big fantasy set pieces that occur, and then the person might wake up and a more mundane explanation will happen. Or right after this big kind of lore type fight that happens, the actual event will occur and it'll be much less hyped. But I think it kind of plays with this idea of using these old like tales and legends and things like that, and kind of the interplay between those legends and the things that actually did happen. And it doesn't do it enough for my taste. Like I think it would have been interesting if it kind of had this more often, but it does enough that I think it's trying to kind of make a point and explore where some of these old ancient tales come from. And the fourth thing I really liked are the setting. And this film is just a beautiful film. It's set in these, I guess, Icelandic northern villages, but you do get some very beautiful scenery. Like the villages themselves are impressive because they look authentic. They're old style. They have dark wood. They feel like a kind of medieval type village. Then you also get a really good variety of locales that are visited. So you'll have rolling hills, you'll have ice-capped mountains, you'll have like geysers and like springs and things like that. You have a volcano at some point, and then you'll have the choppy turbulent sea at times as well. You really do get a good variety of places, and it's all very beautifully done. And the last thing I really liked is the action. It is bloody, visceral, energetic, frenzied. It is mostly very well done. There's a few scenes that are a little bit more choreographed, but overall the action is really well done, and it's kind of striking in how brutal it is. But I also really liked how after the action, the brutality continued. So after like a village is taken, you will have the raiders kind of indiscriminately going through, killing people, taking people, branding them to be kind of sold as servants, things like that. Like there's a lot of brutality that happens after the action. And I like that the film explored both the, you know, the frenzied killing action, but then also the effects that happened after the fact. So things I didn't really love about the movie. The first is the length. The movie is 136 minutes. It definitely feels like it is an epic. I think it's supposed to be this long because you do have like a very long story arc for our hero Amleth. But it does feel like sometimes it just goes a little bit longer than it needs to. It wasn't that bad. I enjoyed the film overall, but it's definitely a film that takes a long time to get there. The second thing I didn't really love, and I've already mentioned this, is some of the action did feel a little bit too choreographed. It wasn't that bad, but there were some action scenes that did feel a little bit too slow. Like I said, a lot of the action is very good and frenzied, so you know, overall it wasn't a big deal. But there were a few scenes where I was like, okay, this doesn't feel as natural. Again, not a big deal. The last thing I didn't really love is the ending, because it does feel like some characters maybe didn't learn from the signs that they were given, or some of the things that they should have taken from encounters. And I'm going to go into that right now. But as you can imagine, spoilers. There will be spoilers. I'm going to the ending. There will be spoilers. So after Amleth has to flee from his, you know, murderous uncle and the rampaging of his village, he lives kind of a nomadic warrior life. We find him later kind of with this band of raiders who are taking over this kind of frontier city, and they go crazy. It's interesting. They could become like frenzied wolves. Essentially, they are like channeling wolf spirits, and they have this ritual before where they kind of are all on fours and like howling and becoming wolves. And then when they fight, they also feel feral almost in their brutality. But he has turned into a very, very violent warrior, and I think it probably fueled by the rage of the betrayal of his father. So eventually, though, after they take this village, they find that some of these people that they're taking as captives, they're being sent up to Fjolnir's village up in the north. And so Amleth thinks, okay, now I know where he is. I'm going to brand myself and be sent with these other captives to go and infiltrate the base. Now, this was interesting because I thought, you know, why didn't he just, I mean, he's a warrior. He probably could save up his own money. He probably could do something. Why didn't he just go himself? I think he wanted to kind of sneak in and be kind of undetected and get a good sense of the place. But it did feel really weird that he didn't just like get some people to come with him, because he was a better warrior than most of the people in that village, and go up and get his revenge that way. On the ship, on this trip up, he meets Olga, who is played by Anya Taylor-Joy, and she is kind of this mystic witch type person. Like she clearly has some sort of you know, mystical powers. She kind of speaks with this kind of like second sight kind of thing, and she and Amleth kind of become friends and make this pact together that they are going to escape together. Well, so when Amleth gets to this village, he starts kind of playing out his revenge. The first thing is he sneaks out at night to survey the village and see where the defenses are. He also goes find some seer. I guess there was a fox that led him to this seer who was living up in the mountains. Very interesting. And that seer like gave him a vision of a weapon that he could get. So this weapon is in a funeral mound, like a burial mound. So he has to kind of break into the burial mound and get this sword. And this was an interesting thing where it felt like maybe this was a play on myth versus reality, because at the start he like tries to grab the sword, and the skeleton doesn't give it up, and the skeleton rises up, grabs the sword. They have this epic fight. He is almost about to die, and he sneaks the skeleton into the moonlight, and the skeleton had clearly not, like, the skeleton had been avoiding the moonlight during that time, and so when it was in the full moonlight, it just froze and was defeated. So you have this like epic fight, and you're like, okay, that's awesome. But then it cuts to him back at the back in the burial mound, and he just like picks up the sword and grabs it, and then like the skeleton collapses. So I'm not sure if there was like, if the fight was kind of mental and he had to like prove himself worthy before he got the sword, or I think what it was is like one side was maybe like the legend of how he got the sword, and the other side was the reality of how he got the sword. It's tough to tell because there are some fantasy aspects that kind of stay in this film. Like the sword, it can only be drawn at night. So anytime someone tries to draw the sword during the day, it just gets stuck. So that doesn't seem like, I mean, maybe it's like a temperature thing. Like maybe at night it gets colder, so the metal contracts, and so it's easier to draw. Like, I don't know. but it did feel like there were some fantasy aspects and some, kind of legendary lore type aspects. But in any event, I think that was I liked that they had this juxtaposition of those two scenes. So through this all, he has this prophecy of how he's going to get his revenge. And one of the things that it says is he's going to get his revenge by a lake of fire. And he kind of follows that to the T. He has a couple chances to take out his uncle, but he doesn't for a few reasons. One time the sword doesn't come out. One time he says, oh, this is not my time. My time is by the lake by the sea. So he seems to be following his prophecy to a T, which fits his character. That his character is someone that is going to get his revenge and do it the way that his father taught him, and that how it was foretold to him. So after a few attacks on the guards, his uncle makes the servants all kind of guard his village. They're not sure if it's internal or if it's external, so he has all the servants kind of tied up on the perimeter of the village to guard it, and he has his guards kind of watching over them. Unfortunately for his guards, they get poisoned that night by Olga, who uses this mushroom to drug them. So they get into this frenzied feel. Some of them attack each other. Some of them just run around screaming. This allows Amleth to sneak out and get to his uncle's house. And when he gets in there, he's hiding, getting ready to pounce. But his uncle doesn't come in. His mother comes in. So he reveals himself to his mother. He says look, I'm Amleth. I'm your son. And now we get a big twist. She tells him after he reveals who he is, I see you inherited your father's simpleness. And he's kind of taken aback. And she says, I never mourned him. Your father endured me because I bore him a son, but his affections were only for silver and his whores. He was a coward feigning to be king. He was nothing. And this again might be, maybe some of the lore versus reality aspects, because in Amleth's mind, when he was with his father, everyone loved him. He was beloved. He was this powerful figure. But perhaps maybe that was just how he was remembering it and how his story was developing versus the reality. Maybe his father wasn't that great of a king. I don't know. His mother didn't seem to like him very much. So then she talks about how his uncle, he actually loved her. He treated her well. He was actually drawn to her. And so she begged him to free her from this loveless marriage by killing the father and the son. She blessed the killing of the son because the son would always be a threat. Not so great for Amleth. And then we also find out that she wasn't this noble born person. She was actually a captive. She showed him the brand that she had, and his father had taken and forced her to become his queen. So after this, you get this weird scene where his mother tries to seduce him, kind of saying, if you kill the uncle, then you'll be the king and you'll have me. It was kind of awkward, very awkward. But it was only a ploy to try to get the sword. She tries to get his sword, but he overpowers her, takes the sword, and runs out. And in his rage, goes and kills his uncle's oldest son, who was kind of a jerk throughout. So he kind of had it coming. Probably didn't have been killed, but he gets slaughtered. After he kills his father's oldest son, he sees Olga and she says it's time for us to leave. And I'm yeah, you probably should leave. And he's no, you stay. I'm going to leave in the hills, but you stay and stay safe. And that was clearly a bad decision, because they all knew that Olga and him were a thing. And clearly she would be someone that this group would use to try to get to him. So it seemed like a very bad decision. I don't know why he told her to stay, but she stays. He flees into the hills. The next morning, when they find the son dead, his father lines up all of his servants and just goes down the line and says if you don't tell me what you know, you're all gonna die. And he just starts killing randomly, killing random servants along the way. He gets to Olga. He knows that she and Amleth are a thing, and so he threatens her and says you better tell me what you know. Almost seeing this, comes down from the hills and tries to free her. But she could have gone with you and then you wouldn't have had this issue. But I don't know, maybe he wanted this epic fight, who knows. He tries to unsheath his sword. It's day, he can't unsheath the sword, so he's fighting with a blunted sword, and he's holding his own. He's beating the guards, but not killing them. And he watches Olga flee, so he's happy about that. Could have done it earlier, but I guess he's happy that she finally fled. But he gets overpowered in this moment. In his distraction, he gets overpowered. He gets hit a couple times, and then he gets captured. Now, after he gets captured, he's beaten by his father and several other people, because when he killed his father's oldest son, he took his heart and has not returned it. And he's not telling him where it is. So his father's trying to beat him to get the location of the heart. So they take a break after they beat him for a while to go do the funeral. They do this elaborate funeral for the son. This was another really like beautiful scene. Like all the ritual scenes are really well done, but this was like a very elaborate funeral scene for the son. But during this time, some crows fly in and peck at the ropes for Amleth, and they free him. And the crows appear to be sent by Odin, because you also see this like Odin character with crows around him. So the crows free Amleth. He runs out, and when his uncle and his men come to kill him after the funeral, he's gone. Amleth has a vision of him like being carried by this Valkyrie up to Valhalla. And so I think he's very happy, like he's finally able to go up to Valhalla. But he wakes up and he's actually in a hot spring, and Olga's there taking care of him. So again, I think this was one of those like visions versus reality. Like he thought he was carried away by a Valkyrie. He was actually probably found and saved by Olga, who then took care of him and like nursed him back to health. But this is an interesting scene because they're both together and kind of talking about their future now, and they both seem very happy. Like finally, for once, he seems pretty happy. So he makes plans for them to escape, like to flee out. They're going to stay with some of his family elsewhere and just get out of this area. And she kind of recognizes that this is weird for him, because he's like, your vengeance hasn't been extinguished yet. And he basically says like, hate's all I've ever known, but I wish I could be free from it. So it seems like he's finally learning, like maybe he should just give up this and go and be happy for once. So they get to the coast, they get on a ship and travel, and they are leaving. They're on the ship, they're leaving, and he sees her cut from when his uncle was like holding the knife to her throat. And when he goes to like get a closer look, he has this vision of his family tree. And the family tree has been like a theme throughout this movie. It actually doesn't look that good. It's very CG, but it's an interesting idea. But up on the family tree, we see him on the tree, and above him, there are two kids. There are two children. And he kind of like then realizes that Olga is pregnant. And this causes a change in him, which is weird because now he seems like he has what he would want. He has someone who loves him, and he has kids. He has a family. He can like be happy. But he says, you won't be safe until Fjolnir is dead. And I was like, I don't think he's gonna go after you. I mean, maybe he would because he's enraged, but he's not really like a powerful lord. He's just kind of up in this village up in the north. You get far enough away from him, he's not going to come after you. But Amleth seems to think he will. He seems to think the only way to keep his family safe is for him to kill his uncle. So despite Olga saying like, no, stop, don't do this, he jumps overboard and swims to shore. I think there's a little foreshadowing here on what is going to happen, because when he sees the twins, he sees the two children. There's a boy and a girl, and the girl is the one that's like wearing the regalia, like the crown and like the regalia of a leader. I think that's kind of foreshadowing that Amleth does not make it, because that implies to me that they're raised by Olga, who is a strong, like independent woman, and she wouldn't care like who was the successor. She would just probably give it to the either the strongest or maybe the girl, because she was strong and fierce, and maybe the girl would be strong and fierce too. I imagine if Amleth had lived, he probably would have given it to his son, because their whole culture and their whole structure was about like the son being the one who succeeds. So I think this was foreshadowing what was going to happen, and he kind of both knew that Amleth was probably going to die, but he jumps off to try to get his revenge anyways. So he goes back to the village, he frees everyone, and he's looking for his father. And when he gets into the bedroom, again, his father's not there. He seems like he's never in the bedroom. But his mother attacks him from the closet. She stabs him a couple times, but he overpowers her and kills his mother. And then while he's standing over his mother's dead corpse, the youngest son, who's very young and who Amleth had actually saved earlier, jumps on his back and starts stabbing him with this little knife. Like stabs him a good like 4 or 5 times, and Amleth like throws him off, and in the process cuts him down, and so he kills the son as well. So the only person left from that uncle's family is the uncle. The uncle appears at the doorway, but he just kind of stands over like his dead wife and dead son, picks them up, carries them away, and just says like, meet me at the gates of hell and we will finish this. So Amleth, injured, but I guess still wanting his revenge, goes to the gates of hell, which is basically the base of this volcano. And this is like a really cool scene, because there's lava, there's smoke, it's tough to see, it's pretty epic. And as he's like going through looking for his uncle, you see his uncle like crouching in the corner, kind of camouflaging, and then he attacks, and they have this epic sword fight. And this was the Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Anakin Skywalker fight that we all deserve. It is a really good fight. It's at the base of a volcano. It's well lit, but tough to see. It's like dark and gritty and like violent. It's a really good fight. And man, I just wish that was the fight that we got in Star Wars. So you know what? The Northman is also the Lion King cross Star Wars. So they fight, but Amleth is already pretty injured, and he eventually gets cut by his uncle. So he's down. It looks like he is going to be overtaken, but he starts kind of yelling, and he gets up, and they have one final epic showdown, and they kill each other at the same time. He cuts off his uncle's head as his uncle stabs him. So Amleth falls back with a sword in his chest, and he's looking up, and he looks like maybe he's finally going to get his wish. He's finally going to go to Valhalla. He sees like the gates of Valhalla open, and he sees a vision of Olga with the two kids. And she says something about like the fate that binds us can never break. Now is the time for your passage, which again, I think this is one of those like lore versus reality. She clearly didn't want him to go. She wanted him to stay. She wanted him to kind of like live out their lives together. He's the one that wanted to get the revenge. And now in his head, now that he's going to Valhalla, she is encouraging it. She's saying like, you know, now you can go to your passage. But I think really she probably wanted him to stay. I don't think she wants to raise two kids in this kind of brutal world by herself. But in his mind, everything's okay. So he sees the gates of Valhalla open up. Odin is there right now, and he's carried up on the back of this Valkyrie. And that's the movie. That's the end. So like I said, it's an interesting film. It is very stylish. It's very violent. It is really great music and a good setting. You can see I didn't really love some of the choices at the end. I didn't love like some of the things that happened. But overall, I think it's an interesting film. I think it's stylish. I think it's something that you're going to want to see. And it's something that a theater is going to really give you a good experience because of that music and that beautiful setting. So that is The Northman. It comes to theaters on April 22nd, 2022. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Please check out my other content. I've got other reviews, interviews, unboxing videos, and recommendations. Thank you.